Thanks, everyone, for being here today. My name is Nolan West. I'm state representative from Blaine. I'm joined here by Catherine and Hunter Muklebust, parents of Harvey, who died in childcare late last year. We also will have a statement, who couldn't make it, from the captain of the Blaine Police Department, Mark Borboom. And he has seen firsthand how important video evidence is when things like this happen. And I'm honored to be joined by so many people, friends and family of the Muklebusts, to announce Harvey's bill, which is to put more cameras in childcare, specifically the infant and toddler rooms. And I never thought about cameras in childcare until July 16th, 2024. I assumed, like any other parent, that when you drop your kid off, they're going to be taken care of with love and affection. But when you find out that's not what happened when your child was there, the idea that it wouldn't be caught, that the perpetrators could get away with something, is hard to stomach. And in my daughter's case, there were two perpetrators who would have suffered no greater penalty than losing their jobs, most likely, if not for video footage there. But because they only retained that footage for a week, it was only one conviction. I've already told my story. It got this whole quest to get cameras in childcare started. But everyone needs to hear Harvey's story. It's horrific, but it shows why this can't stop with what was passed last year. We need to pass Harvey's law. And I'll turn it over to Harvey's parents.
Hello, my name is Catherine Muklebust. I'm here with my husband, Hunter Muklebust, along with a lot of our friends and family behind us. And we're the parents of Harvey Muklebust. Our son, Harvey Gene Muklebust, was 5 days short of his first birthday when he was murdered at daycare. On Friday, September 19th, 911 was called to Rocking Horse Ranch because an infant was found not breathing. This was the first attempt at murdering a child. Luckily, that child survived. Had cameras been present, we would have known the terror of what actually happened that day and would have prevented any future attempts on a child's life. The parents whose children attended this daycare were not notified that emergency services were called. On Monday, September 22nd, the second attempt at murdering a child occurred. The infant was the same victim as Friday's incident. Miraculously, the child survived again, and the parents were able to bring their baby home. Again, if cameras were installed, we would have had the truth of what events were taking place and could have stopped future attempts. Only a couple of hours later, I received a phone call no one should ever have to answer. Our perfectly healthy, beautiful son, Harvey, was not breathing. I raced to the daycare and called Hunter frantically to get home as he was working on the other side of the country. Our beautiful baby boy, the happiest, smiliest, laughing little light in every room, was murdered. Harvey's death was completely avoidable if cameras were installed. The truth would have been revealed after the first attempted murder, and that employee could have been terminated and not allowed to ever work with children again. We lost our sunshine, our Harv monster, the baby who loved to giggle, who lit up when his brother walked in the room, who should be learning to run and talk and explore the world right now.
We think every day about how different things could have been if only cameras had been installed. Other children would not have been harmed, and we would be holding our son. We would not have to daydream about the memories we never got to create. Our 3-year-old wouldn't sit up at night crying for his brother. And asking when he will come home. And we wouldn't have to wear Harvey's ashes in our jewelry to carry him with us. We should have a happy, healthy 18-month-old. This legislation is about accountability. It's about transparency. It's about protecting children. No parent should ever have to wonder what happened behind closed doors, and no family should live with the unanswered questions that we carry. We want everyone's help in passing Harvey's Law so that no other child can be abused or murdered at daycare, a place that parents trust with their whole worlds. Something so minor as installing cameras in order to combat those who seek to hurt children does not compare to the value of a child's life.
Now I'll read a statement from Captain Mark Boom Boom of the Blaine Police Department, who was supposed to be here today, but something came up. Every day, parents trust child care providers with their children, expecting one thing: safety. Most providers work hard to create nurturing environments, but when something goes wrong, we need reliable tools to understand what happened and to protect every child involved. In 2024, Blaine detectives investigated an abuse case in a child care setting. The video system had a retention period of only 7 days. By the time concerns were reported, the footage that could have either provided reassurance that no additional incidents occurred or shown evidence of further harm had already been lost. Those moments could have provided clarity, accountability, and justice. That case made something very clear. When comprehensive video coverage and sufficient retention are not maintained, the opportunity to identify and understand significant events involving a child may be compromised. Cameras in child care settings is not about surveillance. They're about transparency, trust, and protection for children and for the staff who do their jobs with integrity. And adequate retention is equally critical. If the footage disappears too quickly, investigators, families, and providers are left without answers. Our goal is simple: ensure when concerns arrive, we have the ability to see the truth, protect children, and uphold the trust of families placed in all of us. Child safety is a responsibility we share, and it deserves every safeguard we can provide. So, what does Harvey's Law do? It says that any child care center that receives state funding through CCAP, Early Learning Scholarships, or Great Start Compensation, which is those 3 programs are the lion's share of state assistance to child care, must install cameras in all infant and toddler rooms and retain the footage for 28 days. This is expanding on a bill, House File 1915, that had portions of it passed last year that required centers with maltreatment violations to follow these requirements. But obviously, if you have to have a maltreatment violation to have a camera, it's too late. So I'd like to answer some quick questions that I imagine come up related to this bill. Why only state-funded centers and not all centers? Well, I'd honestly like to see all centers. I acknowledge that some parents are uncomfortable with their children being monitored by a camera. I don't understand them at all, but I respect their preference. So I wanted to leave an opportunity for them to have a center without cameras. But when you take taxpayer dollars to support your business, I think it is entirely reasonable to expect a higher standard of safety and accountability. So why only centers and not family child care? Again, I would like to see cameras everywhere. But a key difference between centers and family child care is when it's a family child care setting where something horrible happens, that business is done. They rarely recover. And that's as it should be. But what we've seen in many cases, a center can fire employees, and especially if there's no video evidence, fire employees and move on. It's not good for their business, and nobody wants this to happen, but there is a huge difference in accountability. This work started last session. We established safeguards for the data that these cameras retain, but that only applied to very few centers. And it's better than nothing, but Harvey's story shows that we can't wait. We need to expand. This isn't about distrusting every single child care provider. The vast majority of providers are wonderful human beings who would never dream, who are just as horrified as we are when something terrible happens. Honestly, cameras are probably going to exonerate more providers to show that they did act appropriately and there was nothing wrong, more often than it would bring accountability to somebody who deliberately harmed a child. And it's important to note, cameras are already standard in many child care centers. In fact, nearly every single center, I have yet to find one, doesn't have cameras on the exterior of their building. So this is something that is not an undue burden. It provides important safety and accountability for kids. And if we don't do this, if a perpetrator doesn't confess without video evidence, they're likely only going to lose their job. And if they don't get a felony conviction, there's a good chance they could work with children again. And that is unacceptable. And with that, we will take any questions.
Can you speak to Representative West some concerns about just not necessarily the cameras themselves, but protections around who could potentially a bad actor access that footage of children, which of course there are horrible people on the internet who would love to have that video. So to talk about that and what consultation maybe with cybersecurity experts you have had on making sure that nobody could use that video evidence for a bad reason.
Yeah, that is the primary opposition that people bring up. And what happens in these cases is when somebody hacks into a network, usually it's just a stupid password or a phishing attempt. Those are the number one and two reasons that anything is hacked these days. And we see that happening with, like the city of St. Paul, for example. It is those things you can't take steps to do anything about because it just relies on training, which we do have standards for who can have access to this data in the child care setting, and they're required to have audit logs so you know when this data is being accessed, which would also, if the network is compromised, reveal that it was compromised should that happen. I've talked to numerous folks in cybersecurity and basically repeated to you exactly what they've been telling me is there are different systems and encryption that are standard on wireless networks. This mandates a closed circuit system that happened in 1915, which is even more difficult to have any sort of access to, like Wi-Fi cameras. But it's about as secure as it can be, any data can be. And I consider the safety of children and accountability for those who would harm kids. To me, that is so much more important than maybe somebody hacking in something and then uploading it to AI and undressing the child. Like, it's horrible, but those two things are not the same in my mind. Happy to have more discussions. I want to get this bill passed, but we have consulted, and we will have cybersecurity experts testifying at the committee hearing.
Representative, can you just clarify exactly when this bill is being introduced? There's just a little bit of confusion about whether a bill being heard at 3 is really needed.
Oh, thank you for asking that question. No, when we planned this, I thought there was no way in the world we would not have the bill, but apparently it is still at the revisor's office like many other bills. This bill will be heard the following, March 10th, not at 3. That is a bill regarding CCAP fraud. So it is not that bill. It should be, I expect to get it any day now. And I'm actively talking to a few senators about carrying it in the Senate.
So just to be clear, the bill this afternoon at 3 is, because it has a video monitoring element in it, and I thought it also related to CCAP, or at least some state funds, so can you just draw that distinction for us, just so we don't conflate the two?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that's the way this happened to go. That bill is attached to if senators have more than $500,000 of various CCAP or early learning scholarships, they're required to have those cameras on the entrances and exits for the purposes of verifying attendance. So that's the ensuring accurate records for the fraud reporting. This is not about those sections, it's about infant and toddler rooms. And I expect to get the bill, quite honestly, any day, and then it'll be immediately introduced. And House File 1915 had bipartisan support, bipartisan authorship in both bodies, and was a more expansive bill. The original bill had no restrictions on who it applied to. So once we get the bill, we will also be pursuing co-authorship.
But the threshold is still the same, right, the 500,000, or did I miss? Okay, just any money that you get, okay, sorry.
No, I am very disappointed that it went this way, but it's hard to coordinate these things.
Wes, who has access to these videos? Is it just parents? Do you have to have a password to get in and look at it, or can anybody access this? Like, I can look at my puppy, and anybody else can look at my puppy today, but I'm wondering if it's like that, or when you say closed circuit, does that mean it requires a password?
So when the first edition of this bill passed last year, part of the debate was who has access to the footage. I felt very, very strongly that parents should have access in some capacity. But in the slap desperation, to be honest, of trying to get this in at the last second, this is one of the issues that went straight to the tribunal. That eliminated basically any access unless there is a criminal investigation, except for people designated by the center who have access. However, any facility that has cameras prior to July 1st of this year is exempted from that particular requirement. They can, if they have, Wi-Fi cameras instead of closed circuit, or if they authorize parents to have live streaming or something like that, they can continue to do that. Because I didn't want the idea of making people doing the right thing, replacing doing the right thing made absolutely no sense. So I would love to expand that, but my goal, if that is the point of contention, I think the more important thing is to have cameras.
So your bill would just require that the cameras exist, that the data is retained for 28 days, the idea being that there is that evidence should somebody have done harm to a child. But right now, there would be no, at least according to this bill, any way for a parent to, log in, similar to what Horn said about, pet cameras that I have at my house to see what my dog's doing. That you can't, in the middle of the day, see in real time your child at the daycare facility.
So in my dream situation, it would be parents have access if they have a note from a doctor with concerns. I understand when providers are we don't want people watching over our shoulders with live streaming. I totally get that. I'm surprised centers offer the live streaming. I think they should be allowed to, but I would never consider mandating the live stream aspect. But I would like to see parents have some avenue of access without having to, move forward to press charges.
But right now, this bill does not allow for them to have, it would designate the certain people at the center, correct? To have access to the video.
So this references what passed last year, which the center has to adopt a policy of what employees at the center have access, and then they have to have logs of who accesses the footage.
I have a question for Hunter and for Catherine both. We saw, how this impacted West emotionally last year. We could watch from the beginning to the end of him pushing to get this bill, getting some of it, but not getting all of it. And I'm wondering, here you may be going through that process for the next 2-3 months, and how you imagine you'll feel at the end of it if you don't get everything here that Representative West is proposing.
I think it's going to be a long journey. I think we're already incredibly proud, and we feel incredibly supported and loved by everybody that has stood beside us and who has signed the online petition to pass Harvey's Law. I think there are incredibly valuable and necessary rules in this proposed bill, and we 100% believe that Harvey would still be with us today if there were cameras installed.
Yeah, I think any step in the right direction is what we want. Ultimately, we want the cameras in there so that we can prevent this, because like we talked about, it's completely avoidable if you go back on Friday and look and go, okay, well, this is what happened. And so, yeah.
Can I ask,
Yeah.
will you be frustrated if this doesn't pass? Will you be sad?
I think that we'll probably have some sort of emotion similar to that. I'm not sure. We haven't thought about it not passing. We just want it to pass, because I think that it affects so many people, and protecting a child's life is most important, especially because they can't defend themselves.
I think if I can add to that, I would say absolutely we would feel upset and sad and full of more questions. We wouldn't understand why. But it's not going to stop us from continuing. If that were to happen, we're still going to push forward. As I mentioned, we have a lot of support, and there's a lot of people who care about this bill, and we don't intend to stop.
Representative, are you aware of similar legislation in other states, or is this a new idea?
Outside of being brought up last year, we are currently the only state that has any sort of camera requirement. All right. Thank you, everyone.